In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful, and we ask him to guide us and help us to get the best of these experiences that he's given us. We ask him to guide us and give us the opportunity to learn from each other, and an opportunity to become closer to him. Thank you again for coming. My name is Rukai Ali, and I'm one of the co-conveners of the HR 298 Coalition. And we've been organized now for about a year after we attended a demonstration in Washington on behalf of the unjustly incarcerated Imam Jamil Abdullah Alameen, and also the Pakistani sister who's incarcerated. Her name slips my mind right now. And we decided that we needed to do more on behalf of those who are just incarcerated. And I see HR 998 as a way to make the public more aware of the injustices of COINTELPRO, which led to the persecution of so many people who were speaking up and just speaking, using the rights as an American to speak up against injustice and call the government and everybody to do better and to do what it has promised to do or claims to do. You got to have peace and love. It's final objective for every human being on the earth. And we call this seminar in response to that call, and caring that every human being have what he needs without prejudice, without favoritism, carrying on this responsibility that we've been called to eons ago by the first prophets who were on the earth. So as I know some of you, each of you has some time limits, particularly you, Nina. So I was going to ask you to speak first and everybody benefit from your experience. We're talking about, I hear you're located in Birmingham, and you have some experiences to share in terms of some of the same COINTEL practices that were in operation in the 60s, 70s, 80s here now in the 21st century. In the year 2022, you find some of those same practices in place in regard to people who are speaking up against injustices. So please, I'd like to give you the floor, and please, you can do your own introduction as well.
Sure. So just to make sure, can everybody hear me okay? Okay. Greetings, everyone. My name is Nina Morgan, and I use she, they pronouns. I've been organizing and working and living in Birmingham, Alabama for the last decade. But, you know, I was raised in a small town about 50 minutes north of Birmingham called Sipsey, Alabama. It's a historic mining community. It has a deep history in terms of indigenous removal. You know, Sipsey is called Black Warrior Town, where I'm from. And it's located at the confluence of two bodies of water, the Sipsey and Mulberry Fork, that goes into the Black Warrior River in Walker County. And, you know, it was a north settlement of the Muskogee Creek Nation. So, yeah, and you know, in the 1800s, there was a militia sent to destroy the town and basically wipe everybody out. But the word got to the town before the militia could get there, and so people fled, and you know, while there were definitely people hurt, you know, some people managed to kind of get away. But yeah, there's just a lot of history. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. And Sipsey, and so for folks who may not know me, I've been working as a climate and environmental justice organizer for the last 3 years. So that's kind of how I'm coming into this conversation, as someone who has done a lot of work against major industry in Central Alabama and parts of the coast of Alabama too, with a lot of petrochemical plants and stuff in Mobile. But yeah, Sipsey is definitely foundational to where I'm coming from, because it's a place with a lot of history, a lot of complicated history. You know, it was kind of settled by the DeBart-LeBon Coal Company. A lot of my family members worked in the coal industry and mined, and my grandfather died of black lung, and you know, Sipsey is kind of landlocked by industry. So beyond, there's like a historic graveyard towards the back of the town, and beyond that is land. It's a surface mine that's owned by McWane Inc., which is the same company that owns McWane Science Center in downtown Birmingham. So I grew up, hearing stories of the industry and how, people thought that it was poisoning the water and impacting people's quality of life and health, and really contributing to a high cancer rates in the community. And so really that was kind of foundational to my growing into and really kind of coming into environmental justice work, as I went off to school, went off to college in Birmingham, and just got more involved in movement. So that's just a long-winded introduction about who I am and kind of how I'm coming into the conversation. But yeah, I think I would like to say in terms of COINTELPRO, I for the last 3 years, I've been working as an organizer with a very small organization in Birmingham called GASP, GASP. It stands for the Greater Birmingham Alliance to Stop Pollution. And it was founded in 2010 with the mission of advancing clean air and environmental justice in the Greater Birmingham area through education, advocacy, and collaboration. And from the founding of GASP, it was tense. There's since the founding of GASP, there's been tensions because Birmingham, because of the existence of iron ore, coal, limestone, that kind of thing. It was a really big industrial sector. It used to be known as Pittsburgh of the South and the Smoky City. And Birmingham had that industrial history of air quality issues. And so GAS was founded, kind of battling out those issues and continuing the legacy of a lot of environmental activism in the city of Birmingham in the 70s and 80s. With the institution of the Clean Air Act, which really wasn't being followed in Alabama, especially in Birmingham. The Clean Air Act existed, but industry was kind of still having its way in the city, and so for me, the last couple of years of doing this environmental justice organizing and activism has been, getting to witness firsthand how counterintelligence works, how the police protect industry and clamp down on activists who are trying to shed a light on the exploitation, especially of neighborhoods that are very near to industry, directly impacted by industry, and also witnessing how state agencies like the EPA oftentimes shepherd industries through these regulatory laws so that they can continue carrying on business as usual. And so for me, one of the things that I think about as an example of kind of facing just this resistance is GAS getting our website hacked. There's been a lot of digital security issues as we've kind of tried to shed a light on a lot of the pollution industrial issues, just digital security, getting our website hacked, getting our emails hacked. Every time we did a lot of work with Title V permits. So every major polluter has to have something called a Title V permit. And here it has to be renewed every 5 years. And so when that 5-year mark kind of rolls around, we do a lot of activism and work to try to get the health department to either tighten regulations or deny those Title V permits, particularly for bluestone coke, which is one of the major sources of air pollution in Birmingham, but there's others. And so every time that mark rolls around, there's always, digital security issues. We're always getting our website hacked. I think extreme examples of this have shown up where in 2014, there was a corruption scandal where an elected representative got paid off by Drummond Company, which is a coal company, for kind of keeping the community from getting their soil tested, and getting some information and data throughout the community that would have put them on something called the EPA's National Priorities List. So in 2014, the EPA started doing a lot of testing, especially on the north side of Birmingham. And that testing led to findings of high levels of benzene, pyrite, high levels of lead, high levels of toxins in the soil on Birmingham's north side. And so, we were organizing, but the industry started coming in and funneling money into sham nonprofits. So they created a couple of sham nonprofits that started executing misinformation campaigns, that were basically trying to get people not to get their soil tested, not to trust the EPA, not to trust organizers and activists who were trying to spread awareness about the issues and try to get the community the health that it deserved. Instead, the industries were paying off elected representatives and really well-resourced law firms like Balch and Bingham. Is a law firm here that's known for this kind of business, and they lobby every single level of Alabama government. They ghost, attorneys ghostwrite letters to politicians to basically demand that they not support the North Birmingham 35th Avenue site to be added to the national priorities list in order to protect their bottom line. And some of these same industries donated to the political campaigns of these politicians. And so it's all wrapped up and connected. And these are the things that, myself and other activists, advocates, organizers have witnessed in the state of Alabama, in terms of just this counterintelligence and how, you can't disconnect these industries that are extracting from our communities, extracting from the land, and also are connected to deep histories of convict leasing, like Drummond Company, McWayne, and all these other companies. There's a deep history too, and I don't know if we have time to get into that, of convict leasing. And so the same industries that engaged in that violence are still harming and, targeting activists and organizers that are trying to shed light on and bring justice in. And so y'all let me know how I'm doing on time.
You have a couple more minutes.
Okay. So these are just examples of what we're going through in Birmingham and what I've been going through as an activist, who is fairly, young in this. I've only been organizing for 9-10 years now. And so another example of some of the things that we face in terms of, clapback from these industries here is, these messaging campaigns that try to delegitimize activists and organizers. So last year, I was invited to speak at a sex workers rally. And they wanted me to talk about kind of how environmental justice, connected to the work that they were doing. I think it was held on International Sex Workers Day. And, we kept getting phone calls in our office about, seeing these weird flyers posted all over Birmingham and coffee shops and this and that. And it was basically kind of, they were talking bad about the organization, talking bad about me in particular, and saying that we were advocating for molestation and this and that and the third. And, there were radio ads that were launched trying to basically delegitimize the organization, saying that we were supporting young girls getting into sex work and prostitution and this and that as an environmental organization. In addition to that, a friend let me who was closer to this, let me know the names of some you know counterinsurgency actors who were kind of cloaking themselves as activists, who were planning to show up to the actual rally that I was tabling and speaking at. And right when I pulled up, to the rally with all my, tabling things in my car and stuff, these people were waiting for me, and they were wanting to help me get my table out and set up and all this stuff. And I had to call that out. And it was a really big security issue. There were, you can look it up, Nina Morgan, Birmingham, Alabama. I'm sure you can find an article where, these, especially far right political groups were targeting me and kind of my reputation and the reputation of the organization that I was working with. And so, I just wanted to share, some real life examples of what this looks like and how, when you're really kind of embodying the principles of justice and speaking out, especially in places like Alabama, and when you're seen as a threat to the status quo and a threat to these really large industries that also back that back the political machine, the clamp down that you have to just ready yourself for. And so again, it connects to digital security, hacking our websites and stuff. It connects to people actually physically showing up and trying to track you and follow you, and it connects to your own reputation, them trying to delegitimize it through radio ad campaigns and newspaper articles and flyering, and the people, we did some research to figure out who was behind the radio campaigns, and it was like this sham group called the I Love My City Committee. And to this day, we don't even know who was behind that. We have some ideas, but these are the types of things that you're going to be up against. And so I hope that kind of connects to this panel, provides some framing, provides an on the ground experience from someone like me, and I look forward to hearing from the other panelists and the discussion in general.
Yes, Nina, it definitely does connect us with you and your work. And you have to leave soon, I was told. So I wonder if we can take the 5 minutes now for our Q&A with you, since you have to leave. I see we have 4 questions in the Q&A, and perhaps I can access them and ask you. So, okay, so I don't see any questions here, but I have comments. And someone says, good to see and hear you talk on the issue. We need to continue to learn lessons as we rebuild. I'm not sure if that comment was for Ward or for you, but it certainly does apply to you. We need to have an open discussion on the issues being raised and provide additional information in terms of movement development. That was a question from someone. The issues being raised here is, why are you as an environmental activist being targeted? Why is there so much pressure against people speaking up for the environment? I think you pointed out some of that, some of the reasons for that. Could you again, would you narrate to us why you think that we understand, like, if it's something, someone's committed a crime or someone's been falsely accused of a crime, we're trying to save someone from persecution, or we're trying to speak up for their rights. But an issue like the environment, what is the feedback for them in terms of what is the payoff for them if they stifle these movements for justice around environment? Nina.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that question forward. Yeah, I think the payoff for them is to squash any dissent, any questioning of their legitimacy, authority, and power to operate in the ways that they operate in the state of Alabama. So you got one entity that comes to mind first and foremost is Alabama Power. Alabama Power has a great PR campaign. When you think about Alabama Power, Oftentimes you think about in the event of a storm or natural disaster, the good old the lineman who comes and, restores people's power and this, that, and the third. And I think, that image is very much something that that they value, and so any critique of these major industries and major corporations is seen as a threat, especially if it's starting to get public attention. They don't care about you too much, but when they feel like you're starting to get more and more of an audience, that's when the clampdown can really happen. And so Alabama Power is one of the largest corporations in the state of Alabama, one of the largest employers in the state of Alabama. U.S. Steel is one of the largest employers, and U.S. Steel is also one of the largest landowners in the state of Alabama. And these are industries that generate a lot of money and have a lot of political power. And so any organizer or activist that's in any way, threatening that power is going to be targeted. And I do want to say something else, because this is something we have to connect these local issues to things happening around the world, right? Yeah. So one of the major polluters in Central Alabama is, first of all, Bluestone Coke, which is smack dab in the middle of the Birmingham's north side, the 35th Avenue Superfund site. That industry is owned by the family of Governor Jim Justice of West Virginia, and who people who might be familiar with this family knows that Governor Jim Justice is a coal baron who has wrecked a lot of the ecology, environment, and just community across Appalachia. And so regionally speaking, what's going on in Birmingham, in our urban area, is connected to all of these things that are happening across the region, all of these environmental injustices that are happening across the region. Internationally speaking, ABC Coke, which is owned by Drummond Company, and by the way, the family of well, I won't get into that, but ABC Coke is owned by Drummond Company, also has operations happening going on in Colombia. And there is a really great Vice podcast on this story where you had a lot of at the Drummond Company owned facility in Colombia, there were Colombian union leaders that were trying to resist the work practices and injustices that Drummond Company was carrying on there. And one of the union presidents got killed. People have gotten murdered. And so what's happening too in Alabama is connected to this global system of extraction and industrial violence. And so I think, I just wanted to make that connection. And so anyone who speaks out against that is going to be a target, especially if you are galvanizing the attention of the public.
Someone else made a comment here. The U.S. has been found guilty of genocide as it pertains to environmental racism. And we wanted this information to be widely shared on the chat. The role of environmental racism in this, I think did you say at the beginning, SIPC was a residence of Native Americans? Is that what you said at the beginning?
Yeah, historically speaking, it was kind of like it was definitely a settlement of indigenous people, but also you had a lot of poor Black people and poor white people come together, and so it was kind of like a village that was wiped out, and years later purchased by the DeBart-LeBlanc Coal Company, and so it became kind of like an industrial workers camp. And so people like my grandmother have things like 100-year leases to their homes where they don't actually own the mineral rights to their land. That's the kind of place that SIPC is. And I was going to say before, SIPC, interestingly enough, is also home to Gary Neal Drummond, who used to be the richest man in Alabama. And so it's crazy how these small towns can be home to these multi-national corporations that are inflicting violence across the world.
Yes. One of the questions is, what is the name of your organization? And I think you did say it's GAS, right?
Yeah. It's so and I actually just transitioned from staff at GAS, but it's the Greater Birmingham Alliance to Stop Pollution. They're doing work, and also I do a lot of organizing with a grassroots community group called PANIC,
Yes.
PANIC. It stands for People Against Neighborhood Industrial Contamination.
Yes. Are you working with Brenda Hampton of Concerned Citizens of North Alabama?
I would love to connect though.
Okay. You've heard of her?
No.
Okay. All right. And so that's Brenda Hampton of Concerned Citizens of North Alabama. Someone is saying here, documentation is needed on the communications plan. We're planning to do a documentary to expose our Chevron refinery collaborators. How are you all going to expose the entities that you mentioned?
We're exposing them in real time, and I'm going to have to roll soon. But
yes.
before I do, there's a really great a news story just broke about the struggle in North Birmingham. It's called The Tragedy of North Birmingham by Max Blau, who is a journalist with ProPublica. And I'm going to drop the link. I do recommend that everybody read this, especially if you're joining and you have connections to Birmingham and in North Birmingham in particular, because we need more people to uplift the story of what's going on in North Birmingham. And the article itself does talk about that deep history of convict leasing with some of these industries. And so, and just the history of environmental racism in the community. So I'm going to drop that link really quick for folks to kind of do further reading.
Thank you. And just one last comment. Someone mentioned tribunal2021.com, and there's the international jurists have found the US guilty on genocide and environmental racism. Are you familiar with that decision? That in regard to tribunal2021.com, the international body of jurists, doesn't say which body, has found the US guilty on genocides and environmental racism. And I think that's quite obvious here and in many other places. All right, yes, tribunal2021.com. All right.
I'm not familiar with that, but I'm glad that people are making that acknowledgement, and I'm just hoping for more action.
Yes, and we have here an anonymous attendee. We got a lot more questions here. Someone is speaking about the aligning yourself. Oh, I think, did she leave? Oh no, you're still here. Aligning yourself to the agenda of pimps, panderism, the sex exploitation industry. How was that relevant to your environmental justice work to protect your community from pollution? I think you're on your way out, but maybe you can give us an answer to that question. And the rest of the questions I'll have to forward to you and get answers. Nina, you still there?
Absolutely. I'm dropping this article in the chat.
Okay.
Yeah, the way I think about it, y'all, is everybody deserves a right to breathe clean air and live in a healthy community, no matter what you do, period. So, and I'm the type of organizer that shows up in spaces where I'm invited into, where people want to learn, regardless of what they're doing. I believe in meeting people where they're at. I was invited to the event. I came, I made the connection, I built relationships. It is what it is. And so I am not a believer in gatekeeping any experience that I have with anybody from, who wants to learn about what I'm bringing to the table. And so a lot of, when you do environmental justice work, you quickly learn that communities that are impacted by environmental racism, environmental justice are also impacted by all the other things too, right? We try to these things when it's all connected. And so when I do work on the ground, I interact with sex workers, I interact with pimps, I interact with people on the streets from all different backgrounds. And so the message of climate justice, environmental racism, and deindustrialization is relevant to people who want to know about it. And that's really how I see it.
Yes, because everybody's using the power sources. Everybody's using gas, electric, and water.
Absolutely.
So they have it, yes. So there's just one last comment I want to bring up here. Someone is speaking about how you were infiltrated around the event when you arrived. If you need some assistance in security matters, hit me up on my email and I will give you my number for some initial conversation. This person is Shepard McDaniel, who's a veteran of the original Black Panther Party in New York City. Hi, Shep. Glad you're here. So if he, oh yeah, and his email is, we can capture the chat and we'll be able to forward that to you. Nina, thank you so much. You taught me so much about of things that I didn't know about. I didn't know that how the environmental movement was so much bugged and persecuted by the same people who went after everybody else was speaking about injustice. We'd like to know how can we be of service to you? How can we help you from our different places around the country? What kind of assistance do you need?
I would say just don't forget about little old Alabama. You know, I feel like a lot of people crap on Alabama, but I would say, you know, from my perspective, some of the most just down, committed, loving, loyal organizers and activists are here. And, you know, a lot of people say, you know, you should just leave because like the political system is just so ridiculous and yeah, legislature, like, I mean, the Alabama Democratic Party is just not even, it's laughable, right? But we understand the history of this region and of the state. We know who has come from the state, who has went on to change the world, and we love our people. And so come, you know, come hang out, throw down, share your lessons, your analysis with me, with other people, and try to uplift the fights from the ground. You know, we're in the middle of a historic prison strike right now in Alabama, and I'm just like, it's not getting the news that it deserves. So any ways that y'all can amplify these fights, these struggles for workers and community members, you know, I think that's important. Just staying connected in real relationship and authentic relationship with organizers like me, and just uplifting the fight and trying to connect it to, you know, what might be going on in your community, your city, your hood, your hometown.
How can we get in touch with you? Do you have a website? Does GASP have a website, or how can we get in touch with you to learn more? And
just email me.
Okay, yeah, email you. Okay, so email Nina. And I don't see that in the chat. You can just give us your email address and we'll let you go.
Right. It's I'm putting in the chat now.
Okay.
What's up, Alita? I see you. I see y'all. And I'm so sorry I gotta roll off. But just much appreciations to inviting me to speak, you know, and looking forward to continuing the connection and learning and growing and being in this fight.
Thank you so much for coming and opening my eyes to a lot of what's going on. I didn't know. We have your email address in the chat right now. Let's see. Oh, nmorg94@gmail.com. All right, I already had it. Okay. Okay, so everybody else in the chat, you know, grab that. Thank you so much, Nina, and thank you for sharing. And may your work down there be blessed. May you be blessed with more endurance and patience and people around you to support you, help you, and to love you. And we wish all success to your movement there. We know it's a long fight, you know, it's in stages, but you're so young and so blessed to have started young. And I think what you said about the people in Birmingham, they grew up fighters. I think they had no choice but to grow up fighters, as in many places on the globe.
That's right. All right. Much love, y'all. Stay strong.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye. All right. Thank you, folks. Thank you for participating in the Q&A in the chat. The chat was full. You guys are participating in the Q&A, and not just questions, but comments. We got some real fighters here. We truly do appreciate your participation. All right. So, Ward, you look like you're ready to go. Thank you so much. So I want to introduce Ward. I just became familiar with Ward through Shafia, and I have to apologize to you for not being up to date, but we have that you're a fiery author, scholar, and Native American rights activist. And your work focuses on the historical treatment of political dissenters and Native Americans by the United States government. And certainly that fits into our work for against COINTELPRO.
Yeah, well, I've been at that a while. Became active early 1969, very shortly. Well, I was active before that in Vietnam, but upon return from Vietnam, I guess it's fair to say that I cut my teeth in Vietnam Veterans Against the War, of course, but also part of the original Rainbow Coalition out of Chicago that was organized by Bob Lee and endorsed very importantly by Fred Hampton. Lee was also a member of the Black Panther Party, so relation that goes back at least that far, and been at it ever since. COINTELPRO was a rather prominent reality in that context from day one. COINTELPRO was at the time secret. The term COINTELPRO is a cryptonym. They say acronym, but it was secret. So cryptonym was secret code within the FBI. It simply stands for Counterintelligence Program, but it wasn't simply a counterintelligence program. In fact, really wasn't a counterintelligence program at all. It was a counter subversion, as the FBI saw it, and a counter insurgency program beyond a certain point. It was utilized many of the methods that were developed by the FBI's counterintelligence operations, and counterintelligence by definition is directed against agents of foreign powers, usually hostile foreign powers, having to do with espionage, sabotage, and so forth. Priority there is not law enforcement at all. They're not, the object is not to amass evidence leading to criminal prosecution, incarceration, whatever the penalty might be. It was aimed at, and this is their term, not mine, neutralization of the target.
Mhm.
And yeah, neutralization, which is to cause whatever individuals or entity was targeted to cease doing what it was that had caused it to be targeted in the first place.
Mhm.
And the structural reality of it predates the inception of the program itself, clear back to the beginning of what became the FBI, and before that, in private sector, the Pinkerton Detective Agency, so-called, which was contracted by the Department of Justice since its point of origination to handle such work for the government. And the object was all along to maintain the status quo, business as usual, the structure of the United States as it existed and as it evolved on the basis of the preferences of those in charge, we might call them. So COINTELPRO, which originates formally, secretly, but formally in 1956, is to apply the methods used against agents of foreign powers against the citizens of the United States insofar as they were deemed politically objectionable by the Bureau, which is to say by the status quo, and to bring about their elimination. And you've got a range of tactics, and Nina was talking about some of them, beginning with disinformation, partly disseminated directly by the Bureau and cooperating police agencies, which would be to say the red squads in every single city in the United States, whatever name they applied to them, in some cases a red squad or Bureau of Strategic Services or gang intelligence unit or whatever. You have that on the one hand. That sometimes takes published form, sometimes takes electronic form, more so now than then, but primarily through dissemination of rumors within the community. That's a standard. That's to make misattribution of goals and objectives and thought and so forth to the entities and the activists that are targeted for elimination for the public, to make them seem less appealing or make them seem objectionable on the one hand. and a continuum tactics, which includes infiltration, disruption within the organizations themselves, so-called badjacking, which is when infiltrators working for the various agencies, FBI in particular, but cooperating agencies as well within organizations to bring about destabilization, disintegration, and so on, cause disputes within the organizations. Badjacking by personnel involved in that would be to utilize their position within organizations to miscast legitimate activists as being police operatives themselves, or at least raises suspicions, to foment discontent, disputes, ideological and otherwise, within organizations, and then to exacerbate tensions between organizations, particularly those who were committed to armed struggle, in the expectation that they could create violent altercations, as was done in Los Angeles, as was done in Chicago. In Los Angeles, between Ron Karenga's US organization and the Black Panther Party. In Chicago, and the attempt was made to do the same thing between the Panthers on the one hand and the Black Keystone Nation, as it was called at the time, El Rukin these days. False prosecutions. Well, that predicates with harassment arrests, and the object of that, is to take people off the street temporarily, tie them up in the judicial process, understanding that these are not government-funded entities, and so they have no access to limitless funds to bankrupt them, basically, and mounting legal defense beyond the arrest, whether prosecution results or not, comes to prosecutions, usually on spurious grounds, and you have people being framed. Geronimo Pratt, for example, Daruba Ben Mohad, for example, the Panther 21, for example. Daruba was part of that, but he had cases apart from the Panther 21 case. We can keep running down examples of that sort. Again, the idea being to tie activists up, to utilize these as vehicles to discredit organizations and individuals, key activists that are highlighted for elimination. Not necessarily with an expectation of obtaining a conviction, but hey, a conviction is a bonus. Somebody who is doing often extraordinarily long sentences, as is the case with Panthers from '69 on. You got people still in prison and who have recently died in prison, who were incarcerated in that period, 40 coming on 50 years ago. Chip Fitzgerald, who was the longest serving Panther, died within the past few months, for example. He died in prison. He was still there. They're pretty thoroughly neutralized. And at the top of the pile, I suppose, running from lowest to highest, is assassination, which could be done by collaborating police personnel, as was the case with Fred Hampton, Mark Clark in Chicago on the 4th of December, '69. But it had already occurred in Los Angeles with Bunchy Carter and John Huggins, key members, leadership members of the LA Panthers. Bunchy Carter was the founder. So you've got that whole range of tactics that are applied to destabilize, disrupt, and destroy. That was J. Edgar Hoover's formulation, committed to in writing to secret files at the time that were ultimately released. They were carried out from 1956 to 1971 formally within the FBI. You had that file caption. That was discontinued in 1971 because a citizen group essentially applied the techniques employed in part by FBI in terms of information gathering on targeted groups to the FBI itself. And they, I guess you could say, burglarized an FBI office, a resident agency in Media, Pennsylvania, made off with the files and disclosed the existence of COINTELPRO. The caption appeared, the documents were leaked to the press, but nobody knew what COINTELPRO meant. And so you had this continuum of investigative activity that culminates in the Church Committee in the mid-1970s. And there's a documentation and disclosure in part of what COINTELPRO had been about. And it was prohibited at the time. It had been legally prohibited all along, but was formally prohibited by judicial and congressional action at the time, at least ostensibly, that no one went to jail. No FBI agent has ever gone to jail. The targets, on the other hand, no FBI agent has ever gone to jail for COINTELPRO activities, even though they're now in part well documented. The targets, on the other hand, the Panthers I mentioned, Leonard Peltier from my own organization, the American Indian Movement, and so on, remained in prison for decades, and some still remain, Leonard being one of them, in prison now, although the cases against them were ludicrous. So the forgiveness, I guess you could call it, that was involved, and Ronald Reagan actually called it that, when 3 FBI officials were convicted of having violated rights with a given very narrow range of COINTELPRO operations in New York. He pardoned them before they ever set foot in jail. I'm not even sure whether they were mugshot and fingerprinted, even though they went through the judicial process. The upshot of that, of course, is they changed the captions. Counterintelligence, which should have been called countersubversion or counterinsurgency, became counterterrorism. So they're talking about radicals and extremists and so forth. They start talking about political dissidents as being involved in terrorism, if not committing terrorist actions, supporting terrorism, or interacting with terrorism, or whatever. And you've had an evolution since then. It's important to note that much of what was proscribed as a result of the Church Committee hearings in the 1950s, the mid-1970s, excuse me, is now perfectly legitimate by executive order, by congressional action, particularly the Clinton administration Crime Act in the mid-1990s, and then the follow-up legislation with the Patriot Acts and so on in the early part of this century. They're free to do what it was they were doing. They don't call it what they called it then anymore, but the techniques have been continued. The objectives, the goals and objectives remain. The technological capacity and the organizational capacity to affect that set of goals and objectives has obviously evolved incredibly since then. The military or quasi-military capacity of the state, you've got, as was witnessed at Ferguson, Missouri, you've got small town police forces that are equipped better than third world armies. And who exactly all this equipment is to be directed against, all this firepower, all this armor, all of it, and the communications networks that attend that, it's aimed not at foreign aggressors, it's aimed at citizens, which is to say it's all aimed at us, the 1033 program and everything, which has transpired over the roughly half century since COINTELPRO disappeared. But COINTELPRO, although it's got predicates and although it's continued to evolve, creates a sort of foundational understanding of what this is all about. And so, you know, rather than continuing to attempt to summarize a vast welter of information in that regard during this session, I'm point to books, are kind of seminal. Did I got that right side up? Yeah.
Yeah.
Right side up but backwards on my screen.
Uh-huh.
Okay, these are books that I co-authored with Jim Vanderwall back circa 1990. Okay, and they lay out in considerable detail specific operations, the generalized techniques, the context, and so forth. They've been recently reprinted by Black Classic Press, former Panther Paul Coates, excuse me, up in Baltimore is responsible for that. So these are available again to anybody who seriously wants to pursue an understanding of this. Now, a serious understanding of COINTELPRO is requisite for anybody who is seriously opposed to business as usual in this country, status quo, the continuing evolution of this sort of death culture that we're all mired in, because, and Nina pointed to this in a certain extent, you become active in opposing the status quo and a continuation of business as usual, and the results of that, which we all understand, I think, to a greater or lesser extent. We lived experience leads us to understand it, and if we want to change it, become active in that regard, you're going to become a target. The more effective you are, and this is a key to understanding, the more effective you are, the more seriously you will be targeted. So the more serious you are about engagement and the more effective your activism becomes, the more you are in need of a fundamental understanding of what you're up against and how it works. And in a way, provided with the equipment necessarily intellectually, psychologically, and otherwise to devise ways and means of avoiding the outcomes that the agents of repression have in mind for you. It also, by implication, suggests a number of behaviors afflicting all of our movements that we might best avoid. And Nina, again, was right on target with that when she said, you know, the question raised, well, why would you go and work with sex workers? What's that got to do with the environment? Why not? Why would you not? Somebody's interested and invites you and wants to share political information and potentially build an alliance. Why would you not? That's not simply in terms of types of activity involved, but on ideological distinctions as well, up to a point. I mean, we're not going to make common cause with Nazis, although sometimes.
The board, we have about 10 minutes left for the segment,
Okay.
but the question has arisen, knowing this, and you really shared some valuable information, and how to avoid the outcome of what they would like to do with you if you get too active. So someone is saying, so then what is a good movement strategy to avoid that outcome?
Well, first thing is stop fighting fights among ourselves. Stop trying to discredit one another, jockeying for position, prestige, power within the movement. You know, that has been a plague in a lot of instances in which I've been personally involved in some of them. You really didn't need the intervention of COINTELPRO to impair the activity of the organizations and actors there, because they're so busy squabbling with one another over, I don't know, how dances the dialectic or whatever. It gets to be esoteric and repelling to people you're trying to attract to the movement and organize. in these little bickerings, it creates a perfect field for FBI provocateurs to come in. It's ready made. All they have to do is exacerbate the dynamics that already exist. And so we look at the idea of, as Nina put it, approaching the operation with open arms, which doesn't mean we're all best friends, and it does not mean that we don't have disagreements, but there's ways you go at resolving disagreements, some of which might be called discussion and so forth, without turning it into, you know, the future of the planet pivots upon who wins this particular debate about what the top priorities should be.
Yes.
We got a lot of top priorities. We got more than we can possibly address, and anybody that's attempting to address any of them is a potential ally and should be treated as such. Anyone who attempts to prevent that from occurring, who is responsible for causing false consciousness and divisions within movement rather than unity, may or may not be a police agent, but should be perhaps treated as such in the sense that you treat them with a certain amount of skepticism, not credit their rumor mongering about who's sleeping with whose wife or who's skimming money off of the organization proceeds, and so on.
Yeah.
That's one, resolving our internal tension so that we can maximize such force and effectiveness as we can muster at any given moment. That's really high on the list. Case in the Black Panther Party, ideological dispute and the expulsion of Geronimo Pratt. Because of that ideological dispute led to the fact that Pratt was falsely accused of a murder and received absolutely no support from the Oakland headquarters of the Black Panther Party. As a result, went to prison for 27 years. The result of that should have had support on the basis of commonality Panther membership, at least in terms of the opposition to the state. But the question then became one of who was a supreme commander of the Black Panther Party. Who cares? Who really cares? See, false issue. But that mentality was playing, and the FBI played it, orchestrated beautifully. But
yes, I see. I see that.
In the opening.
Yes.
In the opening.
I want to mention here, someone has their hand raised. The name came up. I'm not been able to click into that. If you're the person who raised your hand, would you please ask your question or make your comment? I think the name was Princess, or let me see. I'm trying to find a raised hand. Okay, I'm not. Let me see. Maybe I can find it here. This is participants. Okay. Someone made a comment here, must always be about the people and not the cult of the personality. I think that's what you were referring to.
Correctly.
I can't find the person who raised their
Which
hand.
does not mean you cannot hold individuals who are worthy of it in respect, but that's different from this cult of personality business.
Yes.
Fundamentally different. If we can't understand that difference, I mean, we're kind of lost.
Yes. Yes. Could you specifically say what actions you were doing that directed COINTELPRO to you? Was it a particular instance or a particular activism you were involved in at the time?
Well, COINTELPRO came at me a couple different times, actually. In the first instance, I don't know exactly what they did, but I was organizing downstate with Mark Clark until he was assassinated in Chicago, building Rainbow Coalition type organization in Peoria, Illinois, which is the general area where I grew up. Did not grow up in Peoria, although I lived there for a while. And I still don't have a clear sense of what the operations did. I mean, I was arrested repeatedly on bogus charges. That was part of it. And yeah, there was that. But later, while I was on the leadership council of Colorado AIM, American Indian Movement, there's more serious targeting going on there. It's included, as we found out, when one of the rather dim-witted prosecutors involved in local prosecutions in the Denver area disclosed the existence of what became known as the spy files and forced a case that was brought in part by the ACLU, but they had to disclose the files. And in the files was information that a group with which we were not aligned. I'm not going to go all into the political background on that, but they had information in Minneapolis that the so-called National AIM office there had contracted for the assassinations of myself, Glenn Morris, who was not a prominent member of the Leadership Council of Colorado AIM, and Russell Means, who was national leadership in the 1970s. Well, I take it back, Means was not to be assassinated. We were all to be hit together at an event that they expected us to show up at. I don't know why. National Congress, the American Indians Convention that was to be held in Denver. They expected all three of us to come together, and there we were to be, Glenn and I, killed and Means badly wounded. They must have thought they had some real sharpshooters on their hands to make the distinction between killed and badly wounded. But in any event, that was the thing the FBI had come with. Minneapolis had transmitted that information to the FBI field office in Denver, who had shared it with the gang intelligence unit. AIM was considered a gang in Denver at the time because our security wore colors, and they were okay. You follow that one. They did the same thing in Chicago. They did it at various points around the country with the Panthers usually, but in any case, they shared the information. The FBI in Denver shared the information, passed it along to Dave Pontarelli, a detective that headed that gang unit. And the response was the Denver police and the FBI sent personnel to the NCAI convention at the appointed time to take notes. I think they were legally required to inform us when they had a credible threat to our lives, but nothing. That came out in the files later on, and that's part, you can say, of a counterintelligence operation aimed at the neutralization of American Indian movement. Specifically in this case, we had revitalized Colorado AIM to a major extent. It was probably the most active AIM chapter in the country, and so there you have it. It was organizing in both cases.
I see. Yes, yes. Just simply organizing. Simply
organizing. There were various things that appear, in my own FBI file, like they suspected me of bombing a National Guard facility in Wisconsin, but it turned out to be National Guard personnel themselves who had bombed the place. I had flown over it going to northern Michigan at the time that it happened. I didn't even know it had occurred. Anyway, yeah, stuff like that.
Yes, I'm trying to find some more questions. And most of the we have here are comments. Actually, someone asked the name of your two books again. I think you held them up. And someone, I'm not sure if it's Jalil Muntakim said I think you wrote a foreword or preface to one of his books.
Who, what?
You wrote a preface. Let me see if I can find that. You wrote a preface to someone's book or afterward. Let's see.
An afterward, we talking about Jamil Muntean?
Yes, yes, Jalil
Yeah,
Muhammad.
yeah.
Yes,
Which carries things up in a way a little more current, although we're still focusing on the figures from that period. It was an operation that began around 2000 called Phoenix Program. Interesting choice of terms, but bringing up all these old cases against the San Francisco 8 was one, and Jamil was, of course, one of the defendants in that.
yes.
But
Yeah,
whether
Jalil is here. We just,
that and the
as I said,
Semi-Detached
Jalil is in
Liberation Army.
Jalil is in the house right now.
Yeah. Oh, he is.
Yes, we really
I
got
didn't
some
know.
really positive people here, encouraging people here. Some of the notes are, we can help each other get the word out. Birmingham legacy is no joke.
Bombing him.
All power to the people. Someone here who is a veteran of the original Black Panther Party. He's a person who talked about security. So it looks like a lot of people here also talked about how your books were excellent and mentioned that what you had written for Jalil Muntaqim's book. I think you've shared with us a really vast picture of COINTELPRO, particularly its origins. One of the things that we had written was that, did it start also beginning of when it was a supposedly communist threat to this country? Did COINTELPRO play a part in that? And that was like before I was born. And also Marcus Garvey.
Okay. As far as the Communist Party threat, that would be the best case you could make that there was any kind of counterintelligence issue involved in COINTELPRO, and it begins in '56, right after the so-called McCarthy period is wrapping up. McCarthy had been crunched. Well, yeah, there is a bit of that. Marcus Garvey, on the other hand, is 1819 when they start that. J. Edgar Hoover was not yet director of the Bureau, but he took on the Garvey case. And yeah, really interesting. This is the first time you ever had Black FBI personnel. Hired a few because of Garvey, because it was really kind of hard to infiltrate white agents into the United Negro Improvement Association, which was Garvey's organization, the largest mass movement in history of the United States, or at least Black. So he hired some agents and spent about a year with personnel inside trying to come up with a basis for criminal charges to be lodged against Garvey. And he writes this memo at the end of that period that says, unfortunately, after all of this intensive investigation, we can't find any kind of basis for making criminal charges that would stick. So
yeah, we have that information. What about
but he said, if we were to continue the investigation indefinitely, undoubtedly we'll come up with something. And that's the way it works. So it's not about law enforcement. Law enforcement is the pretext by which you pursue other objectives. And eventually they come up with the so-called fraud that he committed, sent him to federal prison, and then deported him so he could never come back, which did not destroy UNIA, but, you know, took the wind out of its sails big time. UNIA, I guess, still exists, does it not?
They still have a headquarters in Philadelphia. They still have their building. They refused to give up their building to Temple University. So they're still there. But the archives I was interested in checking out their archives because I do believe my maternal grandparents were involved in the organization. I was told I would have to go to the Schomburg in New York to check their records. That's where all the records and files went.
Or if I could offer you another possibility. I mean, that's a good one, and it's probably closer to you, but Bobby Hill out at, I think he's UCLA.
Mhm.
Hill had done more work on Garvey papers than any 3 human beings I'm aware of. So you might
Bobby
be,
Hill.
yeah.
Where's he located?
I think he's at UCLA.
Okay, thank
I
you.
don't think he's retired yet, but I'm not sure of that. He's in our age group, or my age group, maybe.
Yes, yes, RH, yes. Another statement that's been made is that COINTELPRO, J. Edgar Hoover mostly went for COINTELPRO and the persecution of African American movements and other movements instead of going after the mafia. Like he was kind of forestalled off after going to the mafia, and this was a cover for him. He could spend all his time on this and not really go after
Right.
the mafia who were really committing crimes.
Well, it wasn't until after the Appalachian New York conference was busted by the New York State Police that J. Edgar Hoover was ever even in position to admit there was something. Not the mafia. I mean, the mafia is a specific thing, but organized crime.
Mhm.
And the people meeting at Appalachia were primarily Italian or Sicilian Americans, but not exclusively so. You had this Meyer Lansky and the Jewish mob were part and parcel of that. Okay.
Mhm. Mhm.
So you had this, it was not specific to a given national or ethnic group apparatus that was coordinating activities across the country. And he did go after them once he was forced to acknowledge their existence. He then did assign or detail agents in intensive fashion to come to grips with them. But what was meant by that is real interesting. It was to utilize them as assets in a way
Mm.
in his campaign against left subversion, as
Mm.
he saw it. Okay, so you had, for example, Operation Hoodwink, and that's a clever little pun. Hood, you're gonna
Mm.
hoodwink,
Mm.
and the thing was to convince the mob on the docks in New York that the Communist Party posed a threat to their interests, and you understand what their interests were, which was running dock workers, expropriating dues, doing shakedowns, had to do with smuggling, various things, including drugs, and so on. So it was very lucrative for the mob. All right, and they could convince the mob that the commies were going to undercut that, maybe destroy it, then the mob would, in very predictable fashion, respond,
Mm.
doing the targeting of the communist organizers as surrogates for the FBI, if you will, unwittingly. And you had another one in Chicago where they tried to convince the old Capone organization that Dick Gregory was doing something that would be detrimental to their interests, in the expectation that the outfit in Chicago would, in predictable fashion, deal with Dick Gregory.
Mm.
Didn't work really in either case, but that's the nature of their operations targeting the mob later on, post Hoover, really.
Yes, yes,
You end up with FBI operations that take down heads of the 5 families and all of that,
yeah,
but that's much later.
yeah. Was that operation on a scale as great as the magnitude that's going after what they call leftists and people want to disturb the social order?
Well,
Was that less degree?
it would be a less degree overall. 1959 or 1960, which is just before Appalachia, town in New York, in that meeting. I think the FBI had 3 agents in the New York field office assigned to organized crime. as opposed to 158, something like that, that were assigned to various denominations of left-wing political activity. So that tells you something about it. Now, those proportions shift over time, particularly after Hoover, because it became advantageous in the FBI's representation of itself to show results. But now, how are we going to calibrate this? I mean, when you're talking the heads of the 5 families, you're talking about corporate scale operation in New York. They put considerable resources behind taking them all down. But if you took all of the lefties in the country for that generation, they would not have had the impact on the economy and so forth in terms of shaping policy and the rest that the mob did. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you'd still have this disproportionate weight upon the left. During the same period, eco-terrorists, as they called them, you had really heavy focus on them, a lot of agent and investigative resources that were targeting them.
I have a comment
Probably
here.
same scale, you know, in terms of the number of individuals involved that they were employing with regard to the mob, but the differential in terms of what they were after is what you want to look at. So there's still this greatly disproportionate weight placed upon crushing dissent as compared to going after criminal activity.
Exactly. Brother Shep made a comment. The New Jersey chapter of the Black Panther Party was engaged in a direct war with the mob in Newark.
Okay.
And that's all he says here.
May well be. And, you know, there's elements of that at various places around the country. Although it's not necessarily the case that the Panthers knew that it was the mob per se that they were up against, because you had the appearance of these little local crime operations going on. They were organized, but they're in local mobsters. So that's what it looked like. That's the way it was in Peoria. And I know it was in a number of other places as well. So we had a little set of disputes going on with organized criminal entities.
Yes.
Having to do with real estate and yeah.
Yeah, because they feel threatened.
There was a cop who was a brother of one of the guys who was a coordinator of that. And that cop was pursuing that agenda from his position. Name Emmanuel Manus, just for fun, I'll name him. So you see how this works.
Yes. Again, we're having reminders of Support Mumia. There's an Support Mumia Jamal trial coming up in October. Love Not Fear, reparations, free new African prisoners of war, political prisoners of war, and it ain't over until we win. So we have some comments like that. I want to thank you so much, Ward, for coming. We've heard about you for a long time. We finally got you here. Thank you for coming and sharing.
That was useful.
And yes, very useful to us as well, particularly the history and the suggestions on avoiding these same outcomes. Yeah, people got to stop fighting each other and realize who the real enemy is. That's what we talk about all the time. And I think that's all we got in the chat. Thank you, Ward Churchill. Excellent program. Thank you. Would you have any parting words, Ward? Anything you'd like to share with us? And with this coalition, we are working to try to get Bobby Rush's bill, HR 2998, passed for transparency of COINTELPRO records and make them available to the public. Do you have any suggestions toward that cause and toward that movement?
Well, I'm participating in that effort, and you know, what I would say is to repeat some things that have just been said. It's not over till we win. Power to the people.
Yes, thank you so much, Ward. Appreciate it. Hugh, you got a few minutes.
Yeah, and this will go rather quickly. And I'm going to start by sharing the website for the Imam Jamil Action Network, which is a group. It's actually national in scope. I work with it here in Roswell, Georgia. There's a lot of us here in the metro Atlanta area, but also folks scattered across the country who are doing it. And among the things that we are promoting on our website, besides today's event, um, is this effort asking people to support HR 2998, calling for the release of the COINTELPRO papers. And so we have this link here to write or call Congress and use this tool to do so.
Yeah.
So we have embedded on our website this page that is specific to this action. And if you pull it up, what you find is that embedded on this page is our call to gather, our initial goal is 100 signatures, either 100 phone calls or 100 letters to the offices of members of Congress. This is an application that is hosted or made available to us by Muslim Matters. I believe they are um, uh, uh, using a third-party tool to do it, but it allows you to um, add your name and your address and your phone number, and when you hit the make a call button, it will make a call. Or if you prefer to send written correspondence, you could come up here and hit the right tab. Oh, I think I need to scroll up just a little bit more. Okay. So my
It's right there in the
web
middle.
browser is going to frustrate me a little. Okay. So if I hit the right tab instead of the call tab, then I can again try and figure out how to scroll. There we go. And again, it allows me to add some additional information and to send this letter, which I can accept or adapt, and then hit the add your voice link here, and it will send an email to our member of or my member of Congress. It'll use my postal code to look up Lucy McBath in the House and Warnock and who's the other guy who used to work with the occupation government in Palestine, um, who are my U.S. senators, and it will send emails off in those three directions if I use the right tab and the add your voice button as indicated here. If I don't like, what this letter says, I can edit it, or I can add my own thoughts and, you know, leverage whatever existing relationship I may have with those congressional offices. Now, we've have 45 people so far who have joined us in taking action according to, and again, my browser is frustrating me. Um, and we appreciate, people who will, um, join us in making these phone calls and writing these things. And these forms are available on multiple websites, including the Imam Jamil Action Network, and they all feed back to the same database. And they're all sending essentially the same letters, generating essentially the same phone calls to these congressional offices. But for people who are here today, what we'd really like to ask is that you be in communication with the organizers of this event and ask us to send you the embed code that will allow you to host this exact same form on your website, and to encourage folks in your community and in your organization to also participate in this collective campaign. And so, those are two actions that we're asking people, or three actions. Make the phone calls to your members of Congress, encourage them, particularly in the House. House Resolution 2998 is currently before the Infrastructure Subcommittee of House Governmental Operations, or something like that. I'm flaking
Ways
on
and
the-
Means.
Well, it got multiple assignments, but the primary jurisdiction is over whether or not we get to rename the FBI headquarters. So rather than focusing on the fact that what we really want is to see the full disclosure of the COINTELPRO files, Pelosi assigned the bill as if all we were asking to do was to take Hoover's name off the FBI building, such as it is. But that's the committee that we're primarily focused on, and we're encouraging everyone to write their own members of Congress to put the pressure on members of that committee to get it out of committee and send it to the House floor. So, we're asking for phone calls, we're asking people to send emails, but the third thing we're asking is that you become involved in this effort to help us spread the word by publishing this site, calling us, writing us, getting the embed code so that you can publish this same form on your own organization's website. I'd be happy to answer any questions. That's the short of it. The long of it is that what moves legislation is not filling out forms on websites. What moves legislation is our building ongoing relationships with members of Congress.
I'm on a webinar right now.
And
So I haven't had a chance to. What's going on?
You might want to.
Okay, what time you coming over?
Rukaya, can I ask you to mute yourself while you're having that conversation?
All right, great. Okay, I'll see you then.
We'll be patient for just a moment then.
Okay, okay. That's fine.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Gotta go. Sound like him. Okay,
So-
sorry, I had a family call. Yes.
Okay, so the real, this is a tactic of sending emails and making phone calls. The strategy, though, is building relationships with members of Congress and demonstrating to members of Congress that we speak not just for ourselves, but for organized groups of people who they have an interest in securing the votes of. And it's in that mechanism, it's in the organizing, it's in the demonstration of power and the leveraging of power and the leveraging of relationships built over time that allow us to have an impact on what's happening in Congress, in spite of the money that stands in the way, because there's a lot of moneyed interests that, including, the police unions and such, that never want this information to come to light. But if anyone who wants to defend the idea that this country stands for democratic governance wants to have any sort of integrity, then they have to get behind the agenda that we're advancing. So that's both the short and the long take on it, and I'd be happy to answer any questions and to turn this over to Bilal Sunni Ali for the next portion of this.
Yes, Bilal Sunni Ali and his family have been waiting patiently. And thank you for coming. And Growing Up Target is the next section of the program. I don't see, but also you're on as an attendee. See. Okay, so you're muted now, Bilal. You have to unmute yourself. I don't know if I can do it. Okay, please unmute yourself, Bob Letterer. And there's Bilal. All right. Welcome, Bilal. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam, Sister Rukaya, and thank you very much. It's been a very good program so far. I'm not sure how many people will know, but just want to let the listening audience know, the viewing audience know, that we're planning to do a webinar next month titled Growing Up Targeted. And we have several people, I don't know if they're still on, but I know Princess Medaya, Princess Medaya Israel. If she's on, she would want to come back in as a panelist. Brother Ishmael Muhammad, I know was on, and also Dr. Asante Wasuni Ali. They're on, and hoping they're coming on as panelists. I saw Sanovia Muhammad, she may be coming on as a panelist also. And I also saw Sister Olimata Tal, who's on as an attendee, who may be also coming on as a panelist. So if you let me know who out of those names I mentioned came on, and if I don't know if anybody else that's part of my family that wants to come on, you could just put a note in the chat that you're present, and you could come on. We didn't want to take a lot of time, but we wanted to present the fact what we're going to do next month is deal with children of activists, who were targeted, and how in turn their children have been targeted. And that's why we come up with the title for the program, Growing Up Targeted. I actually, as we were working on this webinar, I came to my son's house one night, and when I came in, the children were sitting in one room, and they were discussing growing up target. They were discussing some days where the FBI's surveillance was tight on them and things they had to do in order to get to school. And they talked about how their teachers were involved in a friendly way and would not allow the FBI to come in and disrupt their children in class, and how on their jobs, sometimes their boss would not allow the FBI to come in and question them and make a scene out of that. You know, I know that I was, also targeted. It was raised earlier. Does UNIA still exist? And that's the United Negro Improvement African Communities League. That's the entire name of our formation. It's the United Negro Improvement Association, African Communities League, which was the organization that was in part founded by, and we have we have been targeted. Many of the members of the Black Panther 21 case were children of families of Garveyites, and so we were targeted as we were beginning to develop developing a new organization. We were joining a new organization, but we were developing a new organization.
So may I interrupt for just a second, please?
Certainly.
I've asked Olimata and Asantwa to enable their cameras so that I could bring them in, but I'm still waiting on them to turn on their cameras. I just wanted to let that be known.
Okay.
Go ahead, sir. I'll shut up.
All right. And I'll just
I'm sorry, I will turn my camera on. I'm just in the bathroom.
Okay, good. Well, we have and Dr. Asantwa Suni Ali. I know a few others were waiting, but they may have had something else to do. I know the time we were told was 2 p.m.
Yes.
So, but just going on without saying, the title of a book most people attribute the term "look for me in the whirlwind" to Marcus Garvey. And "Look for Me in the Whirlwind" is actually the title of the autobiography of the New York Panther 21. That was the leadership in New York of the Panther 21, who I'm saying many of whom were children of Garveyites. And so that targeting of Marcus Garvey, before there even was an FBI, like Ward said, it goes back, the practice of targeting dissent went on long before the actual COINTELPRO operation was established. In fact, before the FBI was established. So I would like to just open it up to whoever is on, just to reminding people that we'll be having that next week, and some of the people you'll hear in the next few moments will be some of the people who will be on that segment.
Yes. Do you have a date for that, Balasumiali? You said that's in October or something? Well, today's October 1st, so.
We're already in October.
Yeah.
So November, it'll be we haven't formed the date exactly, but it should be within the first week of November.
All right, thank you.
Okay, peace everyone. My name is Princess Medallia Yisrael, but some people still know me or call me Efuata Suniali. I am one of, well, between my mother and father, Falani and Bilal Suniali, I'm one of the oldest children of the four of us. I'm also the twin to Shakur Suniali Kofi. And I am the younger sister to Aisha and Chaka Obafemi. So I wanted to open up and show you all this. I don't know if you could see it clearly, but this to me is what growing up targeted is. This is actually a picture of my mother and myself. This is the only picture that I still possess of my mother and I when I was a baby. But this picture also represents, if you can see my youngest sister on the screen, Dr. Asantewa Suniali. This flyer was made because when she was 6 weeks old, my mother was taken back or ripped from her and taken back to prison. And so they had to use a picture of myself with my mother to represent my youngest sister. And to me, that is a prime example of growing up targeted. Not even my mother having even the time and the ability to take a picture with her youngest child at the time. Well, her youngest child, she's the youngest. So, I wanted to present that and not, I don't really have too much to say because I know we're going to do a panel on this, but just to introduce the fact that growing up targeted, it affects you differently when you're older. When you're younger, you may not realize everything that you're how the targeting affects you. I can recall that one thing that my siblings and I did when we were together going to school, we identified actually one guy who would actually follow us. And there was times when we're young, so we would just actually have fun with it. Like basically go up to him and be like, we can see you, we know who you are. Like, you're not inconspicuous. It was fun to us at a certain point because it was just like, we're children going to school and you're following us and you looking real odd in this Black community, even though he was a Black man, but he had like straight red hair and would wear business suits and it'd be 90 degrees in Atlanta. He's on the MARTA bus with us. And so, we would just laugh at that. And so to us, we didn't fear that at that point because it was just like, okay. And plus, we prepared. Our parents raised us with the ability to be present and speak up for ourselves and, and unite in that. So I think now though, as an adult, you realize the impactfulness that these people did on your family, the corruption and destruction of the Black community and the Black power movements. So it's definitely a different outlook on it now. And it's something that, you know, you can kind of just take in and say, you know, if this wasn't done or if that wasn't done, you know, the movement would be here and there. But it also, I look at things more spiritual at times. I also realized that everything that was done by the will of the Creator. And purposefully, you know, we have to place ourselves in position to continue the movement, but and it may look different from what our parents did, you know, but it's still part of the movement. Like for myself, I presently live on 110 acres. My father lives out here. And to me, this is what I consider freeing the land, you know, growing my own food, raising my own animals, my children being in this presence of learning how to cultivate and live. We're not sovereign from the United States, but we still separate ourselves in so many ways. So, you know, growing up targeted, I believe, you know, affected us in many different ways. And I'll lead into my younger sister, Dr. Santua.
Thank you so much, Princess. Thank you. That was very enlightening.
Free the land, everyone.
Yes, free the land.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, Asante.
So first, I'm happy to be a part of this program. Like my sister, I won't talk long because we'll be sharing for the Growing Up Targeted panel extensively and in more detail. But I want to just say thank you to all of the panelists that spoke earlier. Nina, I know she's off now. Ward Churchill, you may not remember, but about over a decade ago, you spoke in one of my graduate studies classes at the Department of African American Studies at Georgia State in Dr. Akayele Umoja's class. So that was perhaps it wasn't my first time meeting you. With a family like mine, I'm sure I had been in your presence prior to that, but that was definitely my first time remembering listening to you speak. And so it is full circle to hear you today and then also participate in this panel. Excuse any background noise, it's a Saturday, children are home watching TV, running around playing. As my sister and father said, I'm Dr. Asante Wasuni Ali. I am the daughter of Ia Fulani and Bilal Suni Ali. I'm also associate professor in the Department of Africana Studies at Kent State University. Here comes my daughter, Free, along with my other daughter, Maremi. Two of my greatest accomplishments. And some of the work that I do around this topic is I produce and direct a research and documentary series entitled Seeds of Revolution. The most recent episode is entitled Growing Up New African, where we have conversation around what it is to grow up in the movement, what it is to grow up with parents, uncles, aunts, who are comrades of our parents, and a community of activists and movement builders moving toward African liberation. And so personally, it's a passion of mine to have this particular discussion. Often when we talk about the Black Power movement, children are not necessarily included in that conversation, particularly around how we were impacted by our parents' movements and activism, whether our parents were political prisoners, whether they be in exile, whether they were, murdered by the state. And so I'm very much interested in these conversations. Hopefully we'll be able to share maybe the trailer for my documentary when we have our panel next month. Again, we don't have the date just yet, but I look forward to it and I'm happy to be a part of these conversations.
And I just wanted to say on behalf of my sister, she did not say it, but if you look up Seeds of Revolution, that's SEEDZ of Revolution, she has it, I believe, on a website, and it's very impactful. It talks a lot about growing up targeted, and it just gives an overview. Thank you, Santua, for typing that in here. An overview of, you know, many different New African Panther Cubs, however you want to label us, of our different interactions with this government. And so, yeah, I just wanted to give that plug. That's it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. That's a wonderful connection. And I think I know some people here who are Panther Cubs that I can connect y'all with.
Great.
Yeah, well, in Philly. I'm in North Carolina now, but some families in Philly. So thanks.
I guess I'll tell you up behind my sisters.
Hi, Olimata Tal. Nice to meet you.
Yes. Greetings, everyone. Greetings, you, Esco, and everybody, Baba Bilal, Winston Churchill. Bless up to my sisters.
Thinking of your mother often.
Yeah, it's been a very long time, Hugh. I think it's been probably over 10, 15 years. I'll just do a brief introduction. My name is Olimata Tal. Everybody calls me Oli. I'm the oldest daughter for first modern day political prisoner, Connie Tucker. Other sister, Maya Tal.
You're muted, Oli.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just talking, didn't realize it. Let me start over. My name is Oli Matatal. My family calls me Oli. I'm the oldest daughter to the first modern day political prisoner, Connie Tucker. My sister, Maya Tal, lives in the Gambia and has been for the past 15 years. In the 70s, Angela Davis wrote a book called If They Come in the Morning. And she did a whole segment on my mother's case, Connie Tucker at the time. And my mother was one of the first young activists in the 60s who was specifically targeted by COINTELPRO. And it started because she started an organization when she was about 16, 17 years old called Black Youth for Peace and Power. And she was back and forth. She originally started doing voter registration at the age of 12, but she was going back and forth between Alabama and Florida organizing. And her school was requested to join a white school, and they were going to close her school down completely. So the young people organized Black Youth for Peace and Power. And the city in Florida where they were bombed their meeting. And so that was one of the instances. She was also constantly followed when she would go to stores with her friends, etc. And at one point, they were even framed and arrested on trumped up charges of theft, stealing things in the store, when in actuality, my mother was not one of those that participated in that. So most of my life, I didn't really know this until one summer I was going to the Gambia. I had taken a group of about 20 students through the work I was doing with the Youth Task Force that I co-founded in Ujima. And we took about 20 students in 1994. And I was going through some books that my father gave me. And that's when he gave me the book about Angela Davis. At that point, I had only known my mother as an activist. I didn't really understand that my mother had been an activist who had been targeted by COINTELPRO. And I often wondered, as a young activist, when I would be on the phone, I would hear these phone clicks, because I was a child activist as well. And I remember after being arrested in Birmingham, our second time being arrested when I was 17, I remember always feeling like I was always being followed. I was always feeling like people watching me, like it was strong. And I'm very spiritual, like Princess as well. So I see things very spiritually and I feel things a lot. So even when people are watching me and I don't see them, sometimes you can feel them. So I say that to say that we were all very young, and we were all affected by the fact that our parents were targeted by COINTELPRO, whether they were in prison, whether they were arrested, whether their jobs or their livelihoods. And so our lives, I think being a child of an activist, our parents give up everything for the movement. They sacrifice their own personal comfortability, their own personal stability for the movement. And so these are the things, opportunities, jobs, normal jobs they would normally get, they won't get because they're targeted by COINTELPRO. And so these are the lives that we ended up living as young people who were children of activists and who eventually became activists. The economic effect of being targeted by COINTELPRO is very deep in our communities, and we don't talk about it. We don't talk about the days where, you know, we can't feed our families, or the days where we can't pay bills, or the days we can't do the certain things that normal families can do because normal families are living regular lives. So I wanted to kind of talk about the economic impact of those who are children of activists and those who have been targeted by the COINTELPRO, because it has a major effect on our families. And that's why I really wanted to talk about that. I also want to talk about the fact that a lot of opportunities that you might want to be part of sometimes might be denied because you are a child of a targeted activist, or a continual activist, second, third generation activist of a child, of a parent that was an activist. So, I mean, a lot of things can happen, but for me, what I found myself doing, I removed myself completely from the American system. Once I noticed that I was always being targeted and a lot of things was happening in my life, I was like, forget America. I literally said, fuck America. And by the time I finished school, opportunities jumped in my lap. And I shifted a little bit out of the movement and focused in the music industry. And what I felt like, because I was working, the Creator had blessed me to be a publicist and be able to be to kind of just be interjected directly in this music industry, not the hip hop side, because I did work with some artists like Dead Press, but more so in the reggae side. I felt like I had an opportunity through music to change the world. Whereas as an organizer on the streets, I might have an impact on a couple hundred people. Through the music, I noticed I was able to have an impact on millions of people. So I started working directly with artists and helping to develop them as revolutionaries through their music and through the work that they were doing in the community. And so when I graduated, I ended up being hired by a radio station in Jamaica as part of their marketing team and also part of their programming team. And I also ended up working with a couple of record labels and an artist by the name of Sizzla Kalonji. So I was able to just kind of use the music to still have a profound impact through the work that I had been and the principles that had been instilled in me as an activist. And I continue to do the work as an activist in Jamaica. I remember one point we were protesting in front of the British High Commissioner, and my mother called me and she said, "Remember, you are not Jamaican. They will deport you." You know, so these were little things that she would remind me of, and to just remind me that even though I was in Jamaica doing what I was doing in America as an American citizen, born in America, that I had to be careful that I was not a Jamaican citizen, and therefore I had to, you know, to try it lightly. But I still did what I was supposed to do, because one thing about being in the Caribbean and being in Jamaica, there's a very strong Pan-African movement down there. And there's a very strong Rastafarian movement. And so the Rasta community and the Pan-African community and even the Muslim community, they embraced me, and the music community. And I created a family and a life for myself in Jamaica, where, I mean, I've able to help transform communities in Jamaica. In Augusttown, where it was a community where everybody was killing each other all year. From 2015 to 2016, they had 0 murders because of the work that I was doing with the Sizzle You Foundation and the community organizations in that community and throughout the country. I also use media. I use media a lot to get a lot of the messages, movement messages to the communities internationally. And so as a publicist and an organizer, I've been able to create a database of media throughout the world. So at the drop of a dime, you know, any story that needs to go out, regardless what it is, you know, our networks, they will send information to me and I will send it out throughout the world, whether it's in Africa, whether it's in the Caribbean, whether it's in Europe, whether it's in the United States, because of my base and my work as a publicist. So, and I want to close because I don't want to talk too long, but I just want to say that at this junction, I represent the Connie Tucker Legacy Foundation. You can go to ConnieTuckerLegacy.org. I wasn't intending to come back to America. When my mother passed, it was kind of hard for me to balance myself. So I ended up moving back to the Gambia, and I've been living in the Gambia for 5 years. So between living in Jamaica and Africa, I've been away from America for about 15 years. And I just came back to America about a year ago. And it took me 6 months just to adjust being back, and I'm ready to leave. Yeah. So I say, as we continue the legacy of our work, my work is more focused internationally. and representing the movement internationally. So you'll see a lot of work that my mother did around environmental justice, around Black nationalism, about reparations. Right now, I'm in New York at the United Nations. One of my partners, RJ Mahdi, he's been awarded by the United Nations as the 25 most influential leaders. He and I work directly. We're helping to repatriate sisters and brothers from the diaspora who want to move to Africa. And these are the things that we do. So I've taken my mother's work and I've, which has always been an international, Pan-African, Black nationalist, civil rights, environmental justice base. And I've continued to make it more international. So for those of you who don't see me, I'm on the international whirlwind. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alimata. Very inspiring. Your mother's name was Connie Tucker?
Yes, Connie Tucker, and she was the first modern day political prisoner. And you can go to ConnieTuckerLegacy.org.
ConnieTuckerLegacy.org? Did you say .org? Okay.
Yes, and we must remember. That's right. Yes. She didn't really speak about her title, and it's like Rosa Parks. You know, a lot of people, you know, in Gambia we say "Sabudu Kut Bopam." Soap doesn't wash themselves. My mother was very humble. She didn't really, you know, talk about being the first modern day political prisoner. But I think it's very important that the movement understands who she was and what she did.
Thank you so much for sharing that. We have some really supportive notes in the chat. Dr. P. Kasima said, Olimata, great perspective. Let's see, where did they get that back? With great perspective, the economic impact of growing up targeted. And the idea of disassociation from the American society. We have options for movement work. We have just some really supportive notes to all of you, people loving you and talking about how beautiful you are. My notes are like running all over the place here, my chat notes. But I think your program next month will be very, very well received. And I will definitely spread the word among my networks and among the families that I know who also grew up under Panthers. Thank you so much again. Thank you, Bilal, for gifting us this segment. It's really wonderful. One new message, let me see what it is. Okay, Alamatra Road, ConnieTuckerLegacy.org. Somebody says, beautiful. Yes, tell your mothers her story. Tell her story. Thank you so much. All right. We've gone way over our time, of course, always happens. But everything was so interesting. Everybody shared, and we just learned so much here. Again, COINTELPRO HR 2998 is our focus. Hugh shared the action steps. You know, sign, write, and embed. That's what I call it. You know, the congressman. As of yet, there are only 24 co-sponsors of this bill, and that number has stayed there for a year. For last year, it's only been 24 co-sponsors. We need more people, more Congress people to go in on that so we can see some action. Again, thank you very much. Bilal Sunni Ali, would you give us, if there's no more questions, just raise your finger if you have a question or somehow let us know. And if not, if nobody has any other comments or questions, I'll ask Brother Bilal Sunni Ali to close us out.
Okay, so far we're noticing no questions and no one else with remarks. I want to mention to you that, you know, we are, Sister Oli is helping us. That's the IJAN, Imam Jamil Action Network. As we know, she didn't mention that her mother, Connie Tucker, did a lot of work in Alabama. And as you know, Imam Jamil, S.A. Trap Brown, did a lot of work in Alabama. Yeah. And that's how we came across Sister Nina Morgan.
Oh.
Attempts to reconnect our work with young people in Alabama and reconnect our work with people who were in the Panther Party in Alabama who grew up in Alabama. And so it was, we knew we was going to present something to bring it back in focus. But what we found was that as we begin to research and reconnect with some of the same people that Imam Jamil connected with, we're connecting in some cases with the children of some of the people that that Imam Jamil, as H. Rap Brown, worked with in Alabama, 40 or 50 years ago. And some of the children and grandchildren are in the movement because they've been pushed that way by their parents, and some are in the movement because they've been drawn naturally to the same things that their parents were drawn to. So we're very glad that everyone who participated today. I want to thank you, Ward, for your participation. Thank you, Nina. And Nina's gone now. And thank you. I saw all the other comrades. I won't go into listing everyone by name, but we want to say, thank you to all of you, and that we want to embellish the work, continue to work, and continue to ask people to continue to fight to make this bill a popular bill in Congress. And also, as we fight to make this bill a popular bill in Congress, learn the stories as we're trying to do through these webinars, learn the stories of those of us who've been affected, and all of us have been affected, but learn the stories in the particular ways that people have been affected by this genocidal program known as COINTELPRO.
Thank you so much, Bilal Sunni Ali, and kudos to you and your family for keep staying intact and keeping the spirit going among you all. You definitely are making an impact on all of us by seeing your children involved in the second, third generation of freedom fighters. And again, our prayer goes out to Imam Jamil Alameen. We never want to forget him at any of the times that he's come together. Imam Jamil Alameen and Mumi Abu Jamal and Leonard Peltier and all of those who our prayers are with every day, hoping for their freedom and release.